budget deficit and to repay the money owed to the school districts.
Thank you. I did want to mention, since my DFL opponent, Mr. Erhardt, mentioned his endorsement list. I have been endorsed by the Minnesota Chambers PAC as well as the Twin West Chambers PAC, so I did want to clarify that. As far as the budget's concerned, I did something I'm not sure I recommend to everybody. I spent quite a bit of time on the Minnesota Management and Budget Department's website researching the current budget situation, looking at the most recent numbers that the MMB folks have put out. It looks like we're going to be about 5% better in terms of revenues in the next 2 years than the past 2 years. Now, it's the next 2 years that this incoming state legislature is going to be setting the budget for. If you look at the past budget, and again, depending on how you do the baseline, it's anywhere from $35.2 to $35.5 billion in spending based on the revenue we have coming in the last 2 years. We'll have another 5% on top of that, roughly another $1.5 billion to $2 billion. So most people would think that another 5% additional revenue should be enough to take care of any needs that the state of Minnesota has. Inflation's running something in the neighborhood of 3%. So with 5% additional revenue coming in under current tax rates, under current law, we'll have more than we need in terms of the inflation adjustments to meet the needs of Minnesota without resorting to tax increases, without resorting to budget cuts. As for the shift, I think the most important thing we do in the next 2 years in the next legislature is to stop the damage. You know, the first rule of holes is to stop digging. We need to stop the gimmicks, stop kicking the can down the road. We need to have a fair and honest budget that solves this year's problems with this year's revenues. So I would advocate we use the revenue that's going to come in, another 5%. We will still have the largest budget in the history of the state of Minnesota, even after adjusting for inflation.
Thank you. Ron, do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I wrote it down.
Thank you.
Every year I was in office, I did a survey of how to handle a deficit situation. So, and there were quite a few deficit situations during that time. Invariably, the people would ask not cut everything, not tax everything. They would come down in the center and say, we need to cut some and we need to raise some new revenue. And I think that if I were to run that today, that same poll today, which I do, like I said, every time I was in office, they would say about the same thing. Now, we do have the problem with the present legislature, and going back quite a few years now, has been unable to use all the tools in the toolbox, meaning that they were not going to raise state taxes, but they continued to raise our local taxes. And that's one of the problems that's going on with our property tax. Our property taxes in the last 10 years for the state have doubled. They've gone from a little over $4 billion to $8 billion. So if you've noticed that in your own property tax bill, it's because the state people that were in charge, mostly the governor, pushed things back. Instead of paying for them at the state level, they pushed them back to the counties and the cities. And they don't have any other way to raise money but to raise your property taxes. So that's one other thing that we have to be concerned about. But I think that the people will understand that maybe we don't do the top 2% or 1%. Maybe all of us are in this together, and all of us ought to look again and see if there are more cuts that are available, and also look at whatever revenues we can enhance with. That's enough. Thank you.